everything from nothing. It is one of the most profound mysteries in our universe, is it not? Some things going on forever and ever without ever coming in contact with anything else, still traveling through the universe. And yet other things bounced off each other, impacted, redirected, broke open. And somehow, all of that back and forth flowing out created individual, specific things that we are experiencing right now, today. The scale of it is truly beyond our comprehension. It's enormous and mystifying and awe-inspiring that some wild chain of events created water on our planet. And then more interactions of star stuff produced life, which became more and more complex. The little amoebas, the protoplants, that primordial flower some of you have been contemplating. And then eventually, spinal columns and brains and diversity in innumerable different ways. Plants, animals, fungi, a variety of ecosystems and types of nourishment and roles to play, all the way forward to the humans that we are today. And each of us, even though we're all humans, have been impacted by experience, by education, by culture, by being with one another, and by being alone with our own thoughts. Each one of us, individual, unique, and special. And at the same time, we are all made of that same stuff. Do we remember that we are all connected? Do we remember that we breathe the same air, we cycle the same water? The monarch that we see here is the same one that is seen at the end of its migration in Mexico. This tension between our individuality and our interconnectedness, the inherent worth and dignity of every individual and the interconnected web of all life, can often be at odds. It can be divisive, and yet it can also be a creative tension. Every one of us is a niche in this large interconnected ecosystem. We are specifically able to fill it. Our dreams, our longings, our passions fill in between everyone else's. How do we allow that to happen? How do we allow everyone to thrive in that situation? I say, look to the more than human aspects of nature to see. How many of you are gardeners? Keep your hand up if you do companion planting. How does companion planting work? It does not work if the basil starts acting like a tomato. The basil has to be in its basilness, and the tomato has to be in its tomato-ness for them to be able to tend to each other and to help each other to thrive. You have to be who you are. You have to step into the fullness of your calling, and you have to allow each other to do the same. And it can be frightening to be the only basil among the tomatoes, right? And yet, the tomatoes need the basil to be basil-y. Here again, there is this tension. We have to allow others to have different perspectives. We have to trust that their experience actually happened. It's valid. They may see something that we don't see. And then together, we can make choices moving forward. We did develop those brains. We aren't just atoms bouncing off each other anymore. We get to make choices. So I ask you today, what makes your heart sing? What gifts do you have standing on the brink of wisdom? What gifts are you being called to offer into this larger space for the thriving of all of us? Can you be brave enough? Can we encourage each other to step in and share it all and make a thriving ecosystem? Can we talk, but can we look up and listen? Because if we can, together we can make and remake the world.
Joy is not made to be a crumb. Joy is made to be experienced, shared, given into, felt. Sometimes when joy arrives, there is this moment when we can just collapse into it and feel it with every cell of our body. And when that arrives, it is so important, I think, so important not to refrain, not to hold back, but to give in. I like exclamation points. Now, when I was a kid and I was in school, I used too many of them, and the teacher would cross them off and say, no, you can put a period here, a period here. And there's a way in education, then getting to high school, then college, and then graduate school. In graduate school, you never use an exclamation mark, ever. It's one of the cardinal sins of writing academic papers. You don't do that. Everything is supposed to be very level and objective, and you're not supposed to show your emotion in that way, especially through punctuation. But I like exclamation points. I've never given up on liking exclamation points. And sometimes people point out that I'll put too many, well, not too many, but they'll just point out that I put exclamation points in my emails, and I put exclamation points in other documents and that. And to me, there is a certain amount of zest that I want to communicate and share with other people. And that can happen in lots of different moments and at lots of different times. And often that comes out as I'm writing, and it feels like, hey, an exclamation point is the right decision at this moment. Yes. I'm actually thinking about, as many of you know, I'm writing a book, and my book is about preaching with passion. The title of it might be Preach with Passion, exclamation point. I'm still working this out with my editor. We'll see what she says. But in any case, I like the idea of exclamation points as a way in which we communicate to others that there's a certain experience of joy that is occurring for us. And we might choose to communicate that in the written form by putting an exclamation point there. But that's not the only way that we sow exclamation marks. We also sow it when we share our joy with other people, which is part of the wisdom of what I think we do here when we share our joys with each other. I recently, it was for my birthday last month, my sister sent me a skylight. Does anybody know what this is? It's a little screen that you plug in, and anybody in your family can send pictures to it. And so not most days, but some days I wake up and I see totally new pictures. And often the pictures that come from my sister are ones of my niece, Margot. And Margot, to me, is a living exclamation mark. She just is. I mean, she's an exclamation point at the park, at her school, when she's over at my parents'. She's just often running around. She's dancing. She's enjoying Super Mario Brothers, which is like her, current favorite thing in the world. And there is just this pure zest for life. And there's no holding back. There's no restraint. There's no restraint. It's a beautiful line from Rumi that says, could I just have that moment where there's no restraint, the way it is with children? And I think about that when I look at Margot. Is there a way in which I can have that degree of joy? Because it can be so hard in this world to find that. It can be so hard with all of the fears that we carry, all of the heaviness that we hold, all the things that are happening in the broader world. But there is this possibility that it can come through and that it can be possible. The writer Julia Baird, she wrote a book called Phosphorescent, and I want to quote this part. Every now and then, you actually do encounter someone who glows, someone who radiates goodness and seems to effortlessly inhabit a kind of joy, or seems so hungry for experience, so curious and engaged and fascinated with the world outside their head that they just brim with life or light. These people are simultaneously soothing and magnetic. The inspiring punk musician Henry Rollins proudly told me that he gets tired but never jaded. Talking to him is like sticking a fork into an electrical socket. You walk away infected with his craving to do, to know, and to be more, to span seas and conquer weakness and fight for the rights of those who cannot or should not be forced to fight for themselves. So ends her quote. What is it like to become a living exclamation point? What is it like to become this vector of joy for other people and not to hold it back, not to restrain it because we think that it's more polite to hold that kind of thing in, or we don't do that because that's just not how things are done. But rather we put that exclamation point at the end of the sentence, and we share our joy with others, unafraid of how it will be held. Part of process theology, which is the class that I'm teaching and that many of you are taking, is the idea that when we can have a fuller and more embodied way in which we live into those kinds of emotions, when we can feel those more deeply, we not only feel them for ourselves, but we share them with others in our relationships. Those emotions radiate out into spirals and circles that we cannot possibly anticipate, and they radiate out into the future as well. We embody a way of holding joy that becomes magnetic for a future that we cannot yet imagine exactly what it'll look like. How powerful is that? How amazing is that? I'm going to end today with the poem that inspired my sermon from Rosemary Traumer. Wherever you go, the chance for joy, whole orchards of amazement, one more reason to always travel with your pocket full of exclamation marks. So we might scatter them to others like apple seeds. Some will dry out, some will blow away, some will not take root, and some will grow into exuberant groves filled with long, thin fruits that resemble one hand clapping. So much enthusiasm that they flutter back and forth in the wind, that although nothing is heard and though nothing has really changed, people everywhere for years to come will swear that the world is ripe with applause, will fill their own pockets with new seeds to scatter. May it be so for us.